everybody. Because technically, where I am, it's the morning. It's 7:30 in the morning, and I'm not in a bathroom this time. Well, kind of. That is a sink behind me, but I'm not in a bathroom. I'm in our hotel room in LA. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. How we doing, everyone? How are we doing? Hello, Abhinav, JG, Gabby, Lars, Racer, Thopi, Taxpus, Patrick, JG, Kang, Wyatt, Rizky, Akshat, Annette, LB, Luke, Patrick, Matthew, Yeetus, J Park, Ard, Martin, Rebecca. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, I know. The elephant in the room, the hair. Look, I just got up, just had a shower. These are like the first words to leave my mouth really today. Okay, when I got out of bed, I didn't really say just shrugs before this. So it's early, okay, and this is still a bit damp, so you're gonna have to deal with it, I'm afraid. But welcome to the stream, everybody. Hope you're all well. Welcome to everyone at 3:30 in the afternoon in the UK. So this is kind of my normal stream time, but I'm not back home yet. But I thought I'd get up early, get the stream done. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. It's coming. Oh. Okay, maybe not. Oh, I forgot. Come on, hurry up. No, okay, it's fine. It's just going to make my eyes water. Cool. Sick. I'm happy with that. Trim looks good. What's that Fernando Alonso quote about the GP2 engine? Engine's good, much slower than before. Hair's good, much shitter than before. There you go. I didn't sneeze. For God's sake, put hats on. Anyway, I'm here in LA. We leave later today. Head back to the UK. And we watched the Austrian Grand Prix last night. Of course, didn't we? Well, yesterday, not last night. And have I even slept? Yes, I have. Also, I've got my ISO as low as I can. I might have to put my stop up a bit because I'm very bright. That's probably a bit better. There we go. Boom. Right. Look, the thing is, if I leave my hair like this, then you lot are more likely to talk about it and there's more engagement. See? I'm playing you, I tell you. Thank you, Reese, for the $4.99, mate. Fans need to be investigated. Mick was super impressive. Too much smoke on lap 1. There's some good talking points there, Reese. We'll come back to them, mate. Yeah, I haven't had a haircut since before we left. So I do need one. But anyway, let's not waffle for too much longer. Oh, also, I haven't got background music on. And I know that you lot, most of you, just most of you, prefer a bit of background music. So just give me a sec and let me find my little chill music. Might be quite loud at first. Let me just make sure it's not going to blow your eardrums out. Don't need that in HD either. And then we could talk all about Austria. And I guess while I'm doing this, you might as well let me know in the live chat what you give this race out of 10. So let me know. 1 to 10. What are you saying, people? What are you saying? Right, is this coming through? Yeah, that looks like it's coming through. Good. All right, what are we saying out of 10, people? For the Austrian Grand Prix. A lot of 8s. A few 9s. A couple of 7s. You know what's really annoying? Where the sun's bouncing off a window over there and it's coming right in my eyes now. It's like I actually need my cap. But I don't want to wear my cap. But I might have to. Hang on. If I just pull this down a bit, I think this might work. Try not to do. Because I know if I even touch the side of my camera while I'm streaming, it'll just... Oh, here we go. Ah, that's... Okay. It doesn't really work, does it? 7 is the correct answer. Jigsaw. Well, look, this Austrian Grand Prix, okay, it had, as far as I'm concerned, it had almost everything. The only thing we were really missing was a proper, I'm going to turn that, was a proper battle at the front. Because, yes, Leclerc passed Verstappen 3 times and made it stick. But, for the most part, Max wasn't really in a position to properly defend it and properly draw out that battle. That's the only thing, because we had some fantastic battles. We had tons of overtakes. There were so many overtakes in that race. I would love to know, does anyone know how many overtakes there were in that race total? Because there was a lot. As far as I felt watching, and the race direction, typically as normal, didn't cover all of them, but I felt like there were so many overtakes. So, and look, maybe I've gone. I'm almost 30 now, so maybe I'm going soft in my old age because I gave Silverstone a 10 last weekend, and I'm giving this race a 9. A 9 out of 10. Yes, 69 overtakes. Very good. Imagine if it actually was. Holy hell, I know, right? And also that shot of Leclerc and Verstappen is pretty sus, isn't it? I thought, honestly, I don't think it could have had much more. I really don't. I think, again, you had battles throughout the field. You had, alternative. You had 2 free stops, tons of overtakes, tons of battles, some quality scraps, and there were moments that would get you off your seat multiple times. And at the end of the day, you had that kind of uncertainty towards the end with Charles. Carlos's engine blowing up, which, don't get me wrong, that's not a good thing, but having that unpredictability in a race only makes it more interesting, only makes it more exciting. Albon almost got in the points. Sad. That would have been good, but you can't win them all. My t-shirt is so bright. It's so bright. Thank you, Wyatt, mate, for the $20. Big up, mate. Thank you very much. What bang of a race Austria got to add to a GP I need to go to. Hopefully your vacation was awesome. Curious to hear your thoughts on California, San Francisco. I live here. I know it's not awesome, but what's your thoughts? I think I prefer LA to San Francisco. I'll give you that one. I'd love to go to the Austrian Grand Prix, although we will talk a bit about that later on, won't we? Because there's been some pretty unfortunate stories coming out of the weekend from a fan perspective in Austria, but we'll get into that. Great race. Okay, and it was, going into the weekend, I think most people felt like this had a Verstappen win written all over it because his recent record at Austria has been very good. It's the Red Bull Ring. But in the end, that's not how it panned out. And in terms of where I watched it, by the way, as well, you might have seen on Twitter, but I was actually with my good friend who's been on the podcast, on the cool down, which I will start again when I'm back home. That's on my list of promises to myself and to you when I get back, is to get that going again, because I've got lots of potential guests already. People have asked, and I just haven't got around to it. But I watched it at Donut with Nolan. I went to Donut. It was good fun. About 8 of us sat down, watched the race. A little bit later in the day, so I didn't actually watch it live. I watched it like a few hours after, because we're in the States. So that was good fun. Nolan is the realest guy, honestly. And such a sick place. Such a sick facility they have here. So that was fun. But, obviously, as for the race results, again, like I say, Charles Leclerc took the win ahead of Max Verstappen. Thank you, Cheese Puffs, for the $2. F2 thoughts, Sargent over Herter at McLaren. Big up Logan Sargent. What more can I say? Though he was fortunate to get the win, let's be honest. Penalties around him. But Lewis getting on the podium again, P3. But Verstappen fastest lap. So only over the course of the whole weekend, because obviously Max won the sprint, so got 8 points for that, and Leclerc got 7 points for coming second. But in the race, Max came second, fastest lap. So actually, he only lost 5 points relative to Charles this weekend. So, yes, he didn't win. But all in all, like damage limitation wise, and Red Bull have probably learnt a bit about their tyres more so than they've learnt something, I think, because tyre deg for them would seem to be particularly bad. So they, for a 5 point loss and then learning all this new stuff about their tyres, it's not really the end of the world for Red Bull, is it? And I just dropped my phone. Nice. Well done, me. And yeah. Another top 5 for George, which makes that 11 out of 10 races he's been in the top 5. Sorry, 11 out of 10. No, 10 out of 11. You idiot. Esteban Ocon P5. Mick Schumacher P6. Lando Norris, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo, and Fernando Alonso sneaking in and getting that last points. Yes, my hair is fantastic. You know it. Yeah, those are the results from the 2022 Austrian Grand Prix. And again, it was a belter. Ricciardo got a couple of points. He did. That is true. Harry Maguire. But yeah, we'll break down the race. But let's talk about winners and losers now. And see, like, I love you. You're all engaging with the hair. See, this is what you have to do on YouTube. Let's start with whose winners and losers should we start with? Actually, no. Let's start with your winners and losers. So I did put the poll out last night, and I closed it first thing this morning, obviously, because I posted it at like 6 a.m. UK time, whatever. Actually, I can open this up again now because it's getting a bit darker in here. And it's one of them where there were a lot of good drives. Weren't so many bad drives. No drives really stuck out to me as anyone having a real shocker. But there were some more than others. So, your winners and losers. Driver W of the weekend. 56% of the vote went to Mick Schumacher. 24% Leclerc. 11 Sainz. 3% to Ocon. Team W of the weekend, 66% Haas, 19 Mercedes, 12 Alpine, 2% Ferrari. Driver L of the weekend, and again, look, you lot put what you want in these polls. I try and make it so that the L of the weekend is the driver who I think's had the worst weekend through their own fault. Not so much unlucky, but when they've cocked up themselves. 23% went to Pierre Gasly, then 19 Perez, 16 Sainz, and 13 Yuki Tsunoda. And then Team L, AlphaTauri. Same thing, when the team's cocked up, whether that's giving them a bad car, whether it's a bad strategy, whether it's a bad pit stop, whatever it is. 38% AlphaTauri, because they were nowhere. Need some upgrades to that car for sure. Aston Martin 29% as well, pretty high. And then Alpine 14, obviously Alonso, another could have been weekend, should have been weekend for him. And then Red Bull 6%. Not really sure why Red Bull there. Perez got taken out. I guess Verstappen didn't win as well. So there you go. Gasly is at fault for 2 collisions, one in the sprint and one in the race. Can't argue with that. So they're yours. That's from just over 2,000 votes. And mine are the same. Okay. I promise I did mine first. I did mine last night. And I collated these just before the stream. And I also have the same winners and losers. The most difficult one for me, it was quite clear that the driver L was going to be Gasly or Tsunoda, because they both shunted people in the race. Tsunoda got. Oh my god. Oh my god. If you haven't seen Alonso. Alonso having a pop at Tsunoda. Oh my god. If you haven't seen it, right? So they're going down. They've come out of turn 3, right? Alonso's got the momentum on Tsunoda, right? Trying to go up the inside to Yuki's right. And Yuki doesn't give him a car's width. So Tsunoda has to take to the grass to get the move done. Right? The classic Albon move from Spa. Not that much on the grass, to be fair. Just a little bit. But Yuki didn't give him a car's width. And then as Fernando's going past, he gives him one of the... Oh my god, I found that so funny. It was so good. And he's like coming up to a braking zone, and he's just like, no. Oh god, it was so good. So that's part of the reason why in my honourable mentions for Driver W of the weekend, I put Fernando Alonso. Look, at the end of the day, he had damage. He had damage in qualifying, and still put it top 10. Then he had the problems with on the start where the blankets. He had an ECU issue, wasn't it? For him to still come through from the back and still score a point, don't get me wrong, like Ocon proved this car was good, right? But for him to still do that, phenomenal drive. It was a toss-up between Schumacher and Alonso for me, for Driver W of the weekend. Fernando's performance was stellar this weekend. And his front left tyre wasn't on properly either, as well. So with all of that against you, and he still scored a point, is insane. So in terms of Driver W, he had to be in there. Arguably even more impressive than Mix was impressive because this was his first. For me, this was his first race. I know he had a good race at Silverstone, but this was a full performance. He looked quicker than K-Mag all weekend, even during the sprint. How much truth was there to him actually being quicker than K-Mag? I reckon he probably was. You lose a bit of speed in the dirty air. Still a thing. And I just think that this was a full performance weekend. Great defending against Lewis. Great race. Got that P6. Maybe Lando should have had P6, but track limits. And either way, outperformed his teammate. I think fantastic weekend for the Mixster. And I put Charles Leclerc in there as well because he won the race. So, in terms of the race itself, he, especially with all of the it was so stressful at the end, wasn't it? Wasn't it stressful at the end? Come on. Because whether or not you like Leclerc, he's had so much bad luck these last 5 races or whatever. And then towards the end, he's like, oh, the throttle. I'm having to put my foot under the throttle to get it. It was just like, why? George's recovery was good, yes, but he also did punt Perez. And I think that was as much as, and I get George explaining after, at turn 4, once you commit to your braking point and turn in, you're going downhill. I don't think there's too much more George could have done to avoid the accident, but that doesn't mean it's still not his fault. It's certainly not Sergio. Sergio was ahead. He should have been given the room. But I get it from George's point of view, but it's one of them that, it's is what it is. And I know people said how can you get a 5-second penalty for ending the race, but you can't enforce penalties based on the outcome. You have to enforce penalties based on what actually happened. You know what I mean? It should be a different penalty just because Perez went into the gravel. That doesn't really make any sense to me. You know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned, anyway. It's like if in football you do two tackles that are identical, but one, the person rolls their ankle and has to sub off because they're injured, and the other they're not injured, and then or if they're injured they have to get a red card. Like no, I don't think that's fair personally. But anyway, that's why George didn't get in the W of the weekend thing for me. Team, yeah, obviously Haas, both for the points. Another really good weekend with a car, with a platform that clearly they really understand. They haven't added upgrades, which in some ways is a good thing because that gives you more of an understanding of the car that you have. If you're not changing it, you just keep the same car and then just keep working on it. And Haas are delivering. So fair play to Haas. Another strong weekend. Mercedes obviously 3-4 again. Got to be happy with that. I put Williams in there for two reasons. So in the race, again, Albon's pace I thought was pretty good. Like finished 12th in the end, but fell away just towards the end. And I think all in all, like he looked at home with, you know, Bottas behind him for a lot of the race and eventually got overtaken. Pace-wise with the McLarens looked pretty similar. In a Williams, I think that was pretty impressive. He's got the upgrades, of course. And I think that, you know, he said after the race that the car was quite peaky and they're still learning it, but there's definitely more downforce there. Oh, my nose has got weird. Maybe it's because I didn't sneeze earlier. And also, I felt like, I could be wrong here, but when I was looking at the race and I was looking at the time deltas and I was looking at like when people were pitting, I feel like Nicky wasn't a million miles off the back. He was still last, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he was as far off the back as he typically is. I could be wrong, but that's how I felt anyway. That's how I felt regarding Mr. Latifi's performance. I actually thought he didn't do too bad. So there you go. Maybe he was a million miles off, but maybe he wasn't. Maybe I'm right. Maybe you're wrong, or maybe I'm wrong and you're right. Cool. And then, driver of the weekends, Pierre Gasly, again, involved in incidents in both sessions. In the sprint, again, in the same way that I deemed, it was a very similar shunt in the sprint, wasn't it, to Silverstone? Very similar. And I deemed Russell most at fault at Silverstone, and I deemed Gasly most at fault this time out because, you know, he didn't need to move over like he did. And he did. I know, obviously, trying to open up the corner, but at the end of the day, like, he has to be more aware. And that kind of, I mean, it ended his race, his sprint race, more than anyone else's. And then in the actual race, he then takes Vettel for a spin in a very similar accident to Russell and Perez. And I felt the same about that. If not slightly even more on Gasly, that one. So yeah, takes that to, he finished ahead of Yuki, but then Yuki was involved in a punt and all, so kind of easy. I put Joe in there as well because he just had a very forgettable weekend. It's hard to put too much on him though, to be fair, but his car obviously like almost broke down at the start. But yeah, there you go. And then I'm not going to put Science in drive for L because it wasn't his fault. He was having a good race. And then Team L, well, Yuki was involved in pushing Alonso wide. What the hell did you do to the real Tom? The real Tommo's gone. Thank you, Sava, mate, for the 500 RSD, man. Appreciate it. Do you think the sprint was worth it, or did it take away from the race? I don't think it. I think it was a great race. I don't think the sprint took away. It's impossible to say, right? Because we didn't have the weekend where, you know, sure, if, you know, with Sergio having a difficult qualifying, and getting pushed back into, the Q2 cutoff, maybe there's something exciting with Sergio coming through the field during the race. Look, again, I think of the sprint race as just like you're just extending the race distance by like a third, and then splitting that over 2 days. So you're like having the race. The race starts on Saturday, then it stops. Red flag. Everyone stays in the pits for a day, and then they go out again. So do I think the whole week, like all it's doing is really extending the race and spreading it over 2 days? That's what I'm saying. So I wouldn't say it took away, because we got a pretty good sprint race. Like, as sprint races go, I thought it was alright. I didn't think it was a bad one at all, really. I'll be honest. But you can definitely argue, what does it add? It adds to the fan experience there on track, because now you're getting competitive running on 3 days. That's what it adds more than anything. And it adds more of a reason at home to watch on a Friday, which is what F1 want. And that's why I think sprint races are, an inevitability. I think long term, I do feel like we'll probably get sprint races every week. But they'll probably have to look at the budget cap if they want to do that. Thank you, Robert, mate, for the €10. Appreciate it. Kind of wish for luck check you and Nolan for backseat. Would have been great parent. She might have balanced out Hayden and Dirk's takes on Russell Perez. I haven't actually watched backseat back yet, so I'm not sure what Hayden and Dirk. But if it's Hayden, it's probably nonsense, isn't it? Love you, Hayden. Yeah, look, I think that it was okay. What can I say? Okay, cool. So they're my winners and losers. They're your winners and losers. And so now the championship sits after 11 of 22 rounds like this. Verstappen, 28 points ahead, 38 points, sorry. I can't count. Ahead of Charles Leclerc, which is not an insurmountable gap by any stretch of the imagination. But Ferrari needs... we're still getting to the point now. Yeah, we're exactly halfway through the season. So my next video, which I'll be working on as soon as I get back, is going to be my like mid-season report. So I'm gonna try and rank all the drivers, and I'm gonna rank them in like an order, okay? Because then people will inevitably have a go at me. But then it's more interaction. What can I say? This hair's so bad, isn't it? Look at it. Look at it. This is what I typically don't put you lot through. 11 to 12 rounds mid-season. Perez, 57 points behind Max. There's still a fight there for sure. There's still a fight there. And Russell particularly, but Lewis as well. I mean, if Mercedes can really pick it up and really sort this car out, with only half the season gone, they've done well. Sorry, I'm just adjusting this. They've done well to secure as many points as they have. They've been super consistent. They've not really had any mechanical failures that I can remember off the top of my head anyway. They've done incredibly well to make the most of the packages that they do have. So fair play. Thank you, JG, mate. As an American fan, it makes no earthly sense to replace Ricciardo with Herta. Ricciardo has 1,000 times the fan base here, and Herta hasn't proven anything in an F1 car. Look, I think that long-term, McLaren need to have a good think as whether they are going to be able to extract prime Daniel Ricciardo from that car, from that team. If they can't, then I think they've got to think elsewhere. If they think they can still do it, keep him. You know what I mean? But there you go. Any other movers we had? Obviously, we had Mick gain a ton of points this weekend. So that's moved him up to 15th in the standings. Ocon's moved ahead of Bottas now. Esteban getting in those points. Again, we'll get into it. And I think as well, like as Logan Sargent continues to do well in F2. In fact, you know what? That's the championship standards. Let's actually talk about the teams now. And let's talk about Williams as I reverse. This is now the reversed version of me, or is it? This is the version that I can see in the camera. Because Williams have got some interesting decisions to make. Now, of course, Latifi has the old package. I think it's next week he should have the upgraded, right? As far as I'm aware, from what I've heard, France. Not next week, weekend after next. Latifi should have the upgraded package on his car as well. But again, in dry conditions, the pace, there has been a big delta, a big gap between Latifi. I think Albon's doing a very good job. And I just think Latifi's not adjusting to this car. Williams got a difficult decision because, as from what I've heard, from what I've read, the Piastri deal seems very much there. But for next year, problem that Williams have is that Logan Sargent is currently P2 in Formula 2. He won the feature race. He was lucky. He actually got P3 in the race, but for sure got disqualified because he didn't have enough fuel in the car. And Daruvala got a stop-go penalty that he didn't serve, so he got a 20-second penalty. Now, obviously, I've already mentioned this, if Williams got the choice between two young drivers, one who's part of their academy, American, so more commercially beneficial to Williams than a Australian driver. Okay, I think that's just fair to say. You've got that, and the fact that he's part of their academy. With Piastri, they're taking on a driver that, look, again, in F3, yes, Piastri beat Sargent, but Sargent was ahead going into the last race. So there's clearly, they're both very competitive with each other, clearly. And I think Piastri is insane, don't get me wrong. And we've seen more from Piastri than we have from Sargent, for sure. But Logan's clearly close. He's clearly up there. So, of course, you'd think that Williams, obviously, developing their own young driver versus taking on Alpines and developing him up, I mean, surely they would rather, and if Logan can convert this F2 championship, we don't know. Look, we're halfway through the season. Felipe Drogovic still got a big lead at the front. But I think a lot of that, to be honest, is that, this is Felipe's third F2 year. So for him to start quickly shouldn't be a surprise because he knows these cars. Logan's a rookie. Owasa, rookie. Doohan, rookie. Hauger, rookie. These are all drivers who have got podiums and done really well in F2. And they've had half the season now to really get used to these cars. And now I think, Felipe's got that expectation's on Felipe now to convert the title because he grew such a lead. And he's still got a pretty significant lead. But it's not what it was. It's not as big as it was. And as these rookies are getting more up to speed, it's going to be really good. If you lot don't watch F2, I'd really, really recommend it this year because I think it's been a quality season so far. Just saying. But anyway, Tommo. There you go. Not much more to kind of, again, Albon's pace looked good. Latifi's didn't look as terrible as it usually does. Almost our point. That would have been nice for me. But there you go. This F2 grid feels very weak, really? Why? What makes you say that? I think it's super competitive. But yeah, interesting to see what Williams do. I'm guessing we'll hear more kind of over the summer break, I suppose. We'll see. Right. Next team, let's talk about Aston Martin, because Aston Martin was in a lot of people's Team L of the weekend. And you can see why. They've got this new upgrade package. Both cars out in Q1 again. The thing is, I do think that it feels like Seb hasn't had a clean weekend for so long, where he's just had and I'm not even talking about qualifying. Even if he has a bad qualifying, for him to just have a clean weekend where he's not caught up in any incidents, there's nothing wrong with his car, there's no bad pit stops, whatever. I just think he needs a clean weekend, and I do think there's performance in that car. Probably not in qualifying trim. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, it's just Aston Martin, man. They're a frustrating. To be fair, I think in the midfield there's a lot of yo-yo. Imagine if the whole championship was just Alpine, McLaren, Haas, Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Williams. Basically everyone apart from Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari. It would be there wouldn't be very many cars on the track. But how competitive would it be? It would be sick. So, it's hard to be too critical of Aston Martin because they're all kind of, some weekends they're doing all right, some weekends not so. Most weekends not so, to be fair. I've still got, there's a lot of talk of, Aston need to really prove to Vettel in the next few races that they're the team to be with. I do think kind of long term, I've spoken about it. I've done a video about Aston Martin. I've done 2 videos about Aston Martin. One saying about how I think they're going to be, this next kind of few years, they're going to be a team that rises up to be one of the best. And then looking at that again after the start of this year and being maybe not. And then they brought the upgrade and everyone was oh, excited. And it's been a bit of a false start again, a bit of a second false start. Cheers, Chase. Thank you, mate. And there's talk of Seb McLaren. I know that's been mentioned a lot. It's difficult because do I have any doubts in that team, in the personnel, in the staff? No, I think that's a great little team they've got there. Less so without Otmar Safnauer, got to be honest. It's more Lawrence Stroll. The impression I get from how he chooses to manage, how he chooses to operate and run that team isn't a particularly positive one. So I am a bit concerned about that. But we'll see. Right. And then Lance, Lance had a 13th. Lance had a super nothing race. You know what I mean? It was very nothing, his race. Right, next team, AlphaTauri. Yeah, they need upgrades, didn't they? Pierre's talked about it a lot. They need upgrades. Performance just isn't there. It's funny how in Baku, they were up there, arguably best of the rest car. Just behind Mercedes, the porpoise in Mercedes. It's mad, isn't it? How they can go from really quick to really not quick. Track dependent, Red Bull Ring and Baku are very, very different tracks. They were great in Baku. Terrible this weekend. Probably the fact that Albon finished ahead of both AlphaTauris. Obviously, I guess both AlphaTauris were kind of caught up in things as well. Maybe the slowest car of the weekend. If you give, if you say that Albon is reflective of the true Williams pace with the upgrade. But yeah, you're right, Gawks. It is similar with Haas. Haas are very up and down. It's like Alpine always seem to be kind of consistently up there. McLaren, yes, it was a poor start to the weekend, but they still got double points. I feel like Haas. I feel like Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, they're very hot and cold. They're either both in the points or both miles off. Gasly needs to be stop being involved in T1 crashes. Yeah, I mean, he has been caught in a lot of early shunts as well, Pierre. I think that, this season hasn't been his strongest at all. He's set a very high standard of himself in 2020 and 2021. And I think those standards, and yes, this car isn't as competitive, but I don't think his standard has been as high. I'll be honest. Which is kind of a bit concerning, because he needs to put himself in the shop window. I know he's confirmed for AlphaTauri for next year, but because I do think he's got a lot of ability, no problem. Rich looks rough on you. Cheers, Jesse. Don't let Hannah see that. Right. One other thing I wanted to mention actually on Williams. Did anyone else notice that Albon was the only car that I saw all race porpoise, especially going up towards turn 3? Did you notice that? When Bottas was coming up behind to try and overtake him and eventually successfully overtake him, Albon was porpoising like mad, or he's bouncing like mad, whatever. I didn't notice that with any other cars. Anyway, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name, but thank you very much for the 5 BGen. What do you think of Mick entering his villain era with him scoring points the past 2 races and almost getting one in the sprint? Cheers. I'll talk about Haas next. I just wanted to mention that we saw Norris porpoise as well. I didn't notice Norris porpoising, but I take your word for it. I didn't notice it with anyone else on the off-board cameras anyway, but Albon was proper bouncing. But I guess it makes sense because they've just got this new package. He didn't complain about porpoising afterwards. He didn't mention it as far as I saw anyway. But they've got this new downfall, so I guess they need to kind of understand this now. And yeah, it's obviously generating more downfalls than they're used to, because then it's pushing the car further down and therefore generating the porpoising, it seems anyway. But anyway, yeah, and I don't think Latifi did, because again, I think that's to do with the upgrade, surely. Right, yes, Haas. Mick Schumacher villain era. A lot of talk about that. Because he wasn't happy, was he, after the sprint? And look, I feel like, he did a fantastic job holding Lewis off, no question. I mean, look, he thinks he was faster than K-Mag. In the race, he did seem faster than K-Mag, so that's not too difficult to believe. He was quite upset. I mean, look, it's funny kind of seeing Mick Schumacher annoyed, because it's kind of like you got a little cute little puppy that's growling at the door because there's a big dog outside or something. It kind of gave me that, because Mick's so wholesome and his classic team radio with all beep beep, because he didn't want to swear. You know what I mean? He's a very nice guy. He's a very kind of cutesy character, and for him to have that face, the face he had in that interview he had after the sprint. That face was lit. That was like a carbon copy of his dad's face when Michael Schumacher went to have a scrap with, who was it? Was it Coulthard? It was Coulthard, wasn't it? When he ran across the pits to try and have a scrap. That was like a carbon copy of his dad's face from that moment. And look, I think that, again, he got that duck off his back. He got those points, and he had a fantastic race. And look, it was Coulthard. I've been saying this I always felt that Mick had in terms of 1 lap pace, you look at the average qualifying gap between him and K-Mag over the whole season, and it's not that much. It's no worse than the quali gaps we're seeing between most other drivers. If you look at the whole season, average it out, right? And Mick's got, a fair bit of heat this year before these last 2 races. And I think a lot of that's been fair, because I think, his out and out pace has looked good, but his actual race performances, he's typically fallen back. But I think getting those points, I think this race, I think last race at Silverstone, he had really good races. I think this was definitely his best race. You know, I think that he's got that potential for sure. I think we saw this in F2 where, you know, he takes a bit of time to get on top of it, and that's fine. Because, you know, I think there's this kind of expectation that every single driver coming through has to be a Max Verstappen, where they can just jump in immediately, outperform their teammate, immediately be on it. Leclerc jumps into that Sauber immediately on top of Marcus Ericsson, beats him, you know. But I think that there is room for drivers who don't necessarily progress and develop in that way. And I think that, you know, we give Mick the time. I think, you know, do I think he's going to be a world beater? Do I think he's going to be up there with, you know, Russell, Norris, you know, these like young new drivers coming through? Probably not, but not definitely not. I just think, you know, that career progression, that arc just might be different. And I've said this so many times, you know, he didn't really get a proper rookie season. Not compared to, you know, what Joe's getting from his rookie season. So I think when you take all that into account, and I think K-Mag is a very, very, very good Formula One driver. I think he's massively underrated. And I think for Mick to now, seemingly, you know, these last two races be operating at a very similar, if not ahead of K-Mag level, it's impressive. Yeah, exactly, with the lower amount of testing as well. So I think, you know, let's give it. Verstappen was impressive in his first year. Come on, he was like 7. So yeah, if you're going to compare Mick Schumacher to Michael, then that's a chip that is always going to be on Mick's shoulder, and you can't expect him to get to those levels because who's getting to those levels, really? But do I think he can be a very competent, consistent, long-term F1 driver who also, yeah, he has that name, so that will buy him extra time. That will buy him more opportunities and sponsorships. It's all good. So yeah, well done, Haas. Well done. I'm happy for them. As much as I've been harsh on Gunter, and I don't think Gunter's been the best team principal by any stretch of the imagination over the last few years, the way he's managed the drivers particularly. But right now, I think they're proving that in terms of teams on the grid, I feel like Haas are like a proper race team. You know what I mean? They've not like, you know, they clearly really understand their car now. And yeah, sure, sometimes they can't get the performance, but they've not brought any upgrades and they've just really honed in on this philosophy. And, you know, they're probably still operating at a lower budget than anyone else. And it's good to see. It's nice to see them back up there like they were when they first come into the sport, which is like scrapping in the midfield. You know what I mean? Okay, Haas, that's done. Let's talk about Alfa Romeo. Not too much to say. Again, kind of gremlins for Joe. Almost kind of ended his race before it started. Sprint race before it started, that is. Ended up getting going in the end. Start from the back. Wasn't able to get points. I mean, it's another full Grand Prix distance for Zhou Guanyu, which you might laugh and be like, oh, that's nothing to shout about. But it's good though. Like, the more distance he gets in that car, the better. He's not having shunts. He had a nice little scrap with Fernando, didn't he, towards the start? That was fun. And actually, I use this opportunity to talk about bloody that 5-car battle you had. Was it Norris, one of the Hasses, Joe, Alonso, someone else? That 5-car scrap was so good. It was so good. That was so sick because you had, was it one of them just come out the pit lane, so they were warming their tyres up, and there was all that. That was quality. That was actually well good. Are you not bored of roasting my hair? Was it both Hasses? Oh, there you go. That's the car I was missing then. The other Haas. And man, that was so sick. And Joe was Joe lost out the most, didn't he? Because he was at the front at the start and he ended up being at the back. I guess he just ruined his tyres by that stage. I'm not really sure. But ultimately, he was part of a fantastic scrap. And yeah, the more experience he's getting, the better. So it was good. And is that a fuck you? And yeah, Bottas just out the points. I don't really know what to say. He got into Q2. Sprint, cool, race, fine. Like, it was just a very, very average weekend for Alfa Romeo. Again, they've been peaky. They've had really good weekends. They've had some shockers. This was just okay. But no points. Nil point. Right. Not much more to say about Alfa Romeo. Next, let's talk about McLaren. The MCL, whatever it's called. Both in the points. Got to be fairly happy with that. Another difficult weekend for Daniel Ricciardo. He kind of had two, and this is what kind of happened a lot last year as well. He'd have like one, maybe two good races on the trot, and then he'd have a few stinkers. And his last couple of races, relative to Lando, pretty good. In the sprint race, you know, he thought he was quicker than Lando, and fair enough. In the race, he wasn't a mile off, to be fair. It wasn't a bad weekend relative to Lando, but it wasn't a great one. It was just okay. He was still behind. He was still slower in the race. He had a bit of a nothing race. Got 2 points in the end. I think there's a lot of disappointment around McLaren, and I think when you look at, you know, how close they were to Ferrari last year, and then you look at where they are relative to Ferrari this year, you know, it's a fair point. It's a very fair point. And look, you know, Ferrari are a powerhouse, and they've, you know, the only reason they were competing with McLaren last year is because they were underperforming. You know, engine nerf, all that. That's fair to say. But at the same time, you got to think that, you know, McLaren, they've got all this kind of, you know, Bahrain, I think it's Bahraini money, isn't it? The investment that came into the team. And they just don't seem to be at the levels that a lot of us were hoping. You know, I want to see McLaren do well. There's a lot of McLaren fans out there. I think with Lando performing the way he is, I think if you give him a race-winning car, he's fighting for a championship. I've absolutely no qualm saying that at all. I think if you give Daniel Ricciardo a car that works with his driving style, which they're clearly not at the minute, but if they had developed a car that worked for him, then I think he would as well. But it's just not, you know, they're fourth. I think they're joint on points with Alpine at the minute in constructors. It's like 81, I think it is. But Alpine have been so much more. Alonso has been so unlucky. Like, if Alonso's converting all the points that he should have without all this rotten luck, Alpine are clear of McLaren. McLaren are like fifth. Look, it's a long-term bet that Lando's hedging by signing that long-term contract, and you know, I think it's way too early to kind of completely write off McLaren as a force going forward, but it's not been the best start, has it? And they're still seemingly learning a lot about their car. And both drivers, it's not just Daniel. You know, Lando's not as happy with this car as he was with last year's car. I think that's fair to say as well. So, yeah. So, yeah, Latifi's dad did also invest. Maybe Latifi in for Ricciardo. Straight swap. Yeah, not much more to say on McLaren, really. Just, again, I think it was a damage limit. I think they weren't very good this weekend. They were slow this weekend, but they were able to maximise what they could. They obviously gained positions in the sprint. And double points. Again, just kind of more damage limitation, I think, for McLaren. Yeah, he was afraid to brake, wasn't he? Not good. Cool. And then right, I've talked about you. You. Alpine. Strong weekend. The Alpine car was clearly very quick this weekend, and not as quick as the Mercedes. Ocon wasn't able to keep George behind him, but all in all, I think Alpine can be happy. I think they've got a better package than McLaren at the moment, which again, this is another like, Daniel, why did you leave Alpine? Because I do think that was I do think that was a mistake. I really do. But regardless, I think it's hard to rate Ocon because like Ocon had a great weekend. Yes, Fernando had damage in qualifying, but Ocon put it where he did in quali. What, P6, 5? Can't remember. And then executed a pretty flawless. Couldn't have done much more. Obviously, inherited a position with Sainz's DNF, so finishing P5 in the end. Good amount of points for Esteban. Really good weekend. I still think that at the moment, Fernando is driving at a higher level. And I think if there isn't the issues, I think it's very, very close between them two. Fernando just, again, all out of luck. But to still get a point is just mad impressive to me. You know what I mean? But I think I think as well, like it's easy to look at Fernando's bad luck and then just be like, oh, Fernando was just unlucky. He would have finished ahead of Ocon. Like, you got to remember that these two were like the closest pairing in terms of teammate performance relative in qualifying in pace last year. So I do think that, I think Fernando has the edge for sure, but I don't think let's not write off Esteban, because he's been raking in these points, man. I mean, look at what Esteban's got. What's he got? 52 points. He's only 12 behind Norris. Clear of Bottas, comfortable. Like, yes, Fernando's been unlucky, but Esteban has, over the course of this year, he's done a very good job. I just, he's not, when they've both had a clean weekend, Fernando's been on top. But this weekend, Ocon did what he had to do. Can't really ask much more of him. Yeah, I think Alonso has the edge on Ocon. I do. Yeah, I've already mentioned the issues for Alpine. Not much more to say, really. Right, next, let's talk about... We've only got, 3 more teams to talk about. So we'll talk about Mercedes. Another P3 for Lewis. Podium. Another top 5 for George. Look, I think that... Do I think they're there with Ferrari and Red Bull? Not yet. Do I think they will get there? I think if there's any chance of a championship fight for either George or for Lewis, I think that there needs to be more. They need to get more out of that car. They need to get more. There needs to be like another upgrade or something. Or maybe it's just understanding more. I don't know. But we're halfway through the season. We've got 2 more races until the summer break. Do I think they're going to mount a title challenge? I don't. Would I love to see them become the best? If Mercedes became the best car for the rest of this season, that would actually be pretty exciting, because there's enough. The gap we've got right now. So you've got Verstappen 208, Hamilton 109. So he's just over half the amount of Verstappen's points. But it's 99 points behind. And then Russell a little bit closer, 80 points behind, which is a surmountable gap. Okay, so again, especially if Leclerc and Verstappen and Sainz and Perez start getting into tangles, and Mercedes just keep on consistently being there. You know what I mean? Will, you just want a nice six-way for each race. A nice six-way. That's Will Brazier for you. So yeah, look, I think that we will see. I think it comes down to the teams, not the drivers, really. I do think as well, like, there was a lot of talk earlier in the year of, like, Russell is bodying Hamilton wash. Look, I know Mercedes was saying about, Lewis has got sensors on his car. They're being a bit more experimental with Lewis's setup, which I think Baku proved. I'm not being funny. And I think these last couple of races, Lewis has been he's not been washing George, but that's a weird thing to say. I think he's been clear of George these last couple of races, and I think he's, George Russell was doing a very, very good job in that Mercedes, but he's not Lewis Hamilton, and I think that's an important distinction to make. But I think it's important for Mercedes that George is operating at a level so close to Lewis, because George is the future. They want him to carry that team when Lewis does eventually hang up his hat, and I think he's doing a cracking job this year. Again, recovered to the P4. Lewis, probably didn't have the pace to win, but another podium is good. It's good. You look funny, thank you. Cool, thank you. I am very funny. Okay, I understand. Right, Red Bull. Yeah, I mean, again, I think to only lose 5 points relative to Charles and learn all this new stuff about tyre deg is probably a positive long term for Red Bull. Perez getting punted was a shame. Again, I think George was at fault for that. And annoying, because it would have been nice to see where Sergio would have been. Because I think, Ferrari definitely had the pace advantage this weekend. And Sainz was looking like he was going to catch Verstappen. Obviously, it didn't happen in the end. But all in all, I think not Red Bull's best weekend, but for them to still be P2, great. I think Sergio had like a hole in his side pod, didn't he? So he couldn't carry on. Sergio said he's been struggling, like this updated car he's been struggling with a bit more. I do think that ultimately, yes, the thought of Sergio Perez beating Max and winning a title potentially is very exciting. But do I think that's actually going to happen? Verstappen's too good for that. I'm sorry. He just is. Like, Sergio's great, but Verstappen's just on another level. And he did what he didn't defend as hard as he need. The thing is, I think Max knew, defending harder wouldn't really have changed anything. The only reason he was within a couple of seconds of Leclerc at the end is because Leclerc was struggling with his issue. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, got what they could. What can I say? And then, last but by no means least, there is a certain team called Grazie Ragazzi, Ferrari, who almost ruined it for themselves again. Now, obviously, Leclerc had his throttle issues, but was able to manage it, finish the race, all good. But Carlos Sainz, boom. And as soon as Carlos Sainz's car went up and then it went back to the race and then Leclerc radio, every time Leclerc radio popped up, I was just like, oh God, no. And then he started talking about issues with the throttle. Now, have Ferrari confirmed what the issue was? Because I haven't seen any confirmation. I literally just got up and just started streaming. So, Ferrari was on fire this weekend. Oh, look, two of you made the same joke, one after the other. Jay Lewis and Christian also. Well done, you two. I mean, it was quite literally an external combustion engine. It was, not seeing a car kind of explode almost, seemingly like that for a long time. In terms of there was that big kind of pressure build up and then there's that big pop. And And it was a bit sketchy, wasn't it? Like him rolling down the hill, the marshals kind of clumsily trying to, Marshall trying to put their gloves under the front wheel or something. It was a bit dodge. Ferrari said engine failure was the same as Baku. Plan E was for... when Ferrari said we're on plan E. I'm like, how many plans do you have? E. There are so many letters before E. Plan E means explode. Smoke operator. These are good. I'm liking these. But either way, I'm sure Ferrari aren't overly keen in divulging exactly what went wrong in any kind of rush. But, not good. Shame for Carlos. That P2 looked pretty nailed on. And again, if he's getting P2, then because that hurts Ferrari as well as it does Carlos, because of course Verstappen then gets extra points for finishing P2 instead of P3, and then this leaves Sainz now behind. He'd have been ahead of Sergio if he'd have got those 15 points for P2, 18 points for P2. It's 15 points for P3. But alas, and he has had rotten luck this year, Sainz. Like, don't get me wrong, he's not been at the level of Charles performance-wise throughout the season, but he's also had rotten luck. It's kind of been a bit both, isn't it? So, did your hairdryer also catch fire? Very good, very good. But I'm glad Charles got it done. Look, I want to see a championship fight to the end, exactly the same as I felt last year. I think last year I didn't really have a horse in, because I want Lewis to get 8, but I wanted Max to get his first as well. Like, I was, the way it happens, we're not getting into it. But, I didn't really care either way. I just wanted it to be exciting, and it certainly was exciting. This year, I'm definitely more like, I want Charles to win, because Max has already got one. And I want to see Ferrari win a title again for the first time since 2008 when they won the Constructors. I want to see him win a driver's title for the first time since 2007, since Kimi won it. So I think it's important. The thing is, but I think when you look over the course of the season, Ferrari and Red Bull, in terms of technical unreliability, I think they've been quite similar. Like, they've both had engines go and they've both had cars pull over, blah blah blah. But then Ferrari have also been shooting themselves in the feet on strategy, where Red Bull, I think they definitely have the stronger strategy approach and driver management approach, and I think that's making a big difference. And I think Ferrari can't afford to let the stuff that they can control as a team slip, because Verstappen is that good. And that's why there's a gap like there is now, Thank you, Marek, mate, for the 100 CZK. Will Ferrari prioritise Charles as their number one driver since we're in half point of the season? Carlos 37 behind. Or Bernardo screw it up with his tactics. Look, it's 37 points. Does Carlos Sainz deserve... Actually, you know what? Let's do a poll. What's the time now, actually? Cool. I'm going to wrap it up soon. How do we do polls? There we go. Right, one sec. So, should Ferrari prioritise Leclerc from now on? Question. Yes or no? So, should they prioritise Charles Leclerc ahead of Carlos Sainz? Do you think they should? Do you think that they should put their eggs in that basket? Because, there's obviously a Constructors' Championship that they want to win, but the Drivers' Championship will always give more headlines, will always give more clout as such, will always be the more celebrated thing, right? So I guess if you're Mattia Binotto, if you're in charge, because the thing is as well, a disgruntled Carlos Sainz maybe isn't scoring as many points, maybe isn't playing ball as much. Maybe there is an argument that you shouldn't prioritise, you should just let it play out, because in the long run you will benefit more from both drivers feeling like they've got an opportunity to win. Because I do think that Sainz isn't the man. Like, I think Leclerc's a better driver. No doubt, no question, right? But what approach actually delivers the most benefit in the long term? Because it's tight. Like, we know that Ferrari and the Red Bull are very, very close on performance. So, give Carlos plan E every race. Plan E. 82% of you saying yes. Should Ferrari prioritise Leclerc from now on? 82% saying yes. I get it. I just, I just think that if Ferrari out and out, right, number one driver Charles Leclerc, how does that affect Carlos, and does that stop Carlos because the thing is as well, if Leclerc wants to win the championship, he not only needs to beat Verstappen, he needs his teammate to be taking points off of Verstappen as well. You know what I mean? So it's a tricky one, isn't it? It is a tricky one. Thank you, Zion. Plan E for Explode for the £2. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much. Right. Cool. Ferrari, done. Right, okay. We've talked about all the teams. We're going to wrap it up. I guess the only... I mean, I don't really want to talk about it, but obviously there was all that... loads of reports of fans being absolute scumbags at the Grand Prix. Not all the fans, of course. It's always a minority in these instances. Chucking abuse at people, being sexist, homophobic, whatever. I've said my piece on Twitter. It's F1's acknowledged it. The venues acknowledged it. The teams, the drivers have acknowledged it. And I think it is important that, when these things happen, it isn't just silent and isn't just allowed to happen. You know what I mean? And apparently this has been happening for years. I'm sure it happens at numerous Grand Prix. I'm not just singling out Austria here. But it seems to be a particular thing here. And I'm sure at other Grand Prix, it doesn't necessarily get mentioned, whatever. It takes people speaking out for this thing to become public knowledge. You know what I mean? And you're going to get a lot of people who are going to be like, oh yeah, but they're just doing it for clout. They're just making it up. They just don't like so-and-so, whatever. Look, there's been so many cases, so many reports, and you can't just is it that shocking? Is it that surprising to me that a bunch, particularly of drunk old blokes at a Grand Prix, would be likely to do this? And I'm not just old blokes either. But drunk, trust me, I'm a football fan, all right? I know how scummy men, particularly, can be when they've had a few to drink at a sporting event. I'm just saying, right? It's no shock to me that it happens, but it needs calling out. Of course it does. So yeah, look, all you can do is call it out. If you're if you're in a position where you're not on the receiving end and you see this shit happening, speak up, man. Definitely, absolutely, I 100% would. You gotta, because it's grim. Yeah, imagine that's your sister, your mum, your niece, whoever on the receiving end. It's grim. It's grim. But and look, it's not just the reality is that in this instance it's manifested seemingly particularly with Dutch fans. In this instance, is this a problem just with Dutch fans? No, obviously not. It's a problem with people. Unfortunately, you get these people, and you got to call it out. And there are no excuses, But there you go. There was all the talk about as well from Lewis shunting as well, and a lot of fans celebrating and reacting in that way. Look, it's not difficult, right? It's not difficult to be like, okay, so booing, for example, booing I don't really have a problem with. I'll be honest. I'm a sports fan. I watch a lot of different sports. Booing is quite normal in most sports. Maybe it's not been normal in F1. Honestly, I don't really. It doesn't bother me. That's like, yeah, pantomime, sports, whatever. Boo the one you don't like, cheer the one you do like. I don't really care. I think that's okay. But celebrating when someone crashes, cheering, whether you're, a Hamilton fan celebrating when, which there were some, because I was there, Silverstone 2021, when Verstappen shunted. Where I was sat, there weren't many, but there were a few celebrating. Or you're a Max fan celebrating Lewis crashing at Austria this weekend. Like, it's just, what? That's not even, like, that's stupid. That's like, again, I use football analogies all the time. That's like celebrating when someone gets, like, crunched and has gone down injured. Like, you don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so if someone has a shunt, you don't, like, especially Max, because Max's last year, obviously, was such high speed as well. Like, you just don't know what conditions the driver's going to be in. Like, again, last weekend, right? You got Joe have that massive accident, right? Huge, flips over, super dramatic. He's taken out the car. He's checked. He's fine. He doesn't need to go to hospital. None of that. Albon has a very innocuous accident, like, at first glance, right? But because he's hit the wall and then he's been collected a couple of times, compared to Joe, Albon's accident looks like nothing. But he does have to go to hospital because he's, potentially had more damage and he's got, like, he's feeling the strain more from the accident. You don't know. Like, you look at an accident at first glance and it could be a lot more serious than you think. So it's not difficult. It's really not difficult. Just don't, when someone shunts, like, yeah, maybe wait until they get out of the car. If you want to boo them, I don't really care. Like, but don't celebrate when someone crashes. Like, it's knobhead behaviour. But whatever. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Oh yeah, well, F2, Logan Sargent won. I already mentioned it, haven't I? For sure got disqualified. Daruvala got a penalty, so Logan inherited the win. 2 feature race wins in a row. You know I love Logan, my favourite F2 driver. Doing a good job. But yeah, anyway. Right, I'm going to wrap it up now. So thank you all for coming. Next time you see me, I'll be back in the United Kingdom of Great England land. And it's been a pleasure being in the States and being in Canada. It's been fun. This stream is at a normal time for my UK European audience. And we'll be back to norm soon. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting what I do. If I didn't have you lot supporting what I do, I wouldn't be here. So, oh yeah, well done Merry as well in F2. He did well. Roberto Merry, ex-F1 driver. Yeah, cheers everyone. Stay safe, be well, be happy, be kind. Have a good weekend off of F1. And then we'll see you again for France, right? Next race, France? Pretty sure it's France. Right. Anyway, cheers everyone. Thanks again. Stay safe, be well. Goodbye. Ciao, adios. I am done. Au revoir. Arrivederci. Bye.